Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers. I'm your host, Mariam Zien, and here are your top stories. Gaza toll climbs as occupation commits 5 massacres, leaving dozens dead and hundreds injured. Next in our program, UN Human Rights Council urges halt in arms sales to Israel amid genocide warnings while demanding Israel's accountability for Gaza war crimes. Also coming up, U.S. administration urges ceasefire amid Gaza conflict and Democrats fear impact on Biden's electoral future. And the Polisario Front urges the UN Security Council to enable MINURSO to fulfill its mandate in Western Sahara, urging the Council to address the aggressive policies and escalations pursued by the Moroccan occupation. Welcome again to the program. Palestinian Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip announced on Friday that the death toll from the ongoing Zionist war since October 7 had risen to 33,091 martyrs and 75,750 injured. The ministry said in its daily statistical report that the occupation committed 5 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip during the past 24 hours, resulting in 54 martyrs and 82 wounded who arrived at hospitals. The same source added that a number of victims are still under rubble and on the roads, and that ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them. The Secretary General of the NGO Doctors Without Borders, Christopher Lockyer, said that the people of Gaza need an urgent and lasting ceasefire in a press conference held at the organization's office in Geneva. Lockyer stressed the need for the UN Security Council to ensure that the ceasefire resolution it adopted earlier is not a meaningless act of politics, as he put it. The Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders stressed the need to move now from words to deeds and to prevent the war in Gaza from continuing.
Humanitarian workers are protected. No ifs, no buts. We do not accept the narrative of regrettable incidents. We do not accept it because what has happened to World Central Kitchen and MSF's convoys and shelters is part of the same pattern of deliberate attacks on humanitarians, health workers, journalists, UN personnel, schools and homes. This is not just about implementing an effective deconfliction mechanism. Our movements and locations are shared, coordinated and identified already. This is about impunity, a total disregard for the laws of war, and now it must become about accountability.
Regarding the Israeli targeting of relief teams, the Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders underlined that they are not fortuitous incidents, as the Israeli narrative pretends, but rather deliberate attacks on humanitarian and health workers, journalists, as well as United Nations employees. Let's take a listen.
Any tool that enables the visibility and the pressure to change the way that this conflict is going should be used. But at the end of the day, we need to move now from words into actions. We cannot allow this war to continue in the way that it has been doing, because there are now nearly 33,000 people who have been killed and 200 aid workers have lost their lives. So, while I am not pro or against any particular meeting, what we now need is words to be turned into action.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that since the beginning of the Zionist war on the Gaza Strip, the occupation military campaign has brought relentless death and destruction to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Antonio Guterres also said that children in Gaza are dying today for lack of food and water, adding that this was incomprehensible and entirely avoidable. UN Secretary General emphasized that the collective punishment of the Palestinian people cannot be justified by any means.
Over the last 6 months, the Israeli military campaign has brought relentless death and destruction to Palestinians in Gaza, with more than 32,000 people reportedly killed and more than 75,000 injured, the vast majority women and children. Lives are shattered. Respect for international humanitarian law is in tatters.
In the same context, Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar bin Jamaa, said that the ongoing war on Gaza has put the people of the Strip at risk of starvation. In his speech during a Security Council session called upon by Algeria with regards to the threat of famine in the Gaza Strip and the targeting of relief workers, Ammar bin Jamaa stressed that the occupation brutally kills everyone in Gaza, which was also the case for the workers of the World Central Kitchen.
Today, we are gathered once again as the aggression against the innocent Palestinian civilian reach for its 6-month mark in 2 days. 6 months. 6 months of barbarity and collective punishment. 6 months of suffering for the people of Gaza. 6 months that test the humanity of each and every one of us. 6 months that test the international order and our ability to preserve coexistence for future generations. 6 months that pushed the entire population of Gaza into famine. The ICG observed, and I quote, Palestinians in Gaza are no longer facing only a risk of famine, but that famine is setting in. To address this situation, the ICG issued 2 orders to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. However, the Israeli occupying power did not comply. Did not comply.
Bin Jamaa also said that the occupation continues to commit more crimes and more violations despite the UN Security Council demanding an immediate ceasefire.
The Security Council also acted by demanding an immediate ceasefire through its resolution 2728. Yet, more than 10 days after its adoption, the occupying power blatantly refuses to implement it. Refuses to implement it. A conduct unworthy of a United Nations member bound under Article 25 of the Charter to carry out the decision of the Security Council. Yet, it is not surprising from a killing machine that commits all violation of international law with total impunity. They are confident that they will be never held accountable. And the occupying power continues to commit more and more crime, more and more violation.
Ammar bin Jamaa stressed that the crime committed by the Zionist occupation against relief workers is not surprising and does not constitute an exception, but is rather just a new chapter in the book of the occupation's crimes. Let's take a listen.
The crime perpetrated against World Central Kitchen personnel is not surprising and is no exception. It was an attack that targeted them systematically, car by car, as stated by Chief Jose Andres, the founder of World Central Kitchen. It is just a new chapter in the book of crimes committed.
Ammar bin Jamaa also renewed Algeria's demand for an immediate ceasefire that would provide appropriate conditions for the work of humanitarian and relief agencies and agencies in the Gaza Strip.
We have said it, and we repeat it again today. Humanitarian actors cannot be asked to serve at the peril of their lives. There must be assured of the condition that allow them to reach those in need. And only an immediate ceasefire can create those conditions.
The UN Human Rights Council demanded on Friday a halt in all arms sales to the Zionist entity, highlighting warnings of genocide in its war in Gaza. The text called on countries to cease the sale, transfer, and diversion of arms, munitions, and other military equipment to Israel in order to prevent further violations of international law and abuses of human rights. The UN Human Rights Council also adopted a resolution calling for Israel to be held accountable for war crimes in the Gaza Strip. Algeria has strongly criticized the adoption of a policy of double standards by certain countries regarding the Palestinian issue, highlighting the international community's failure to safeguard people facing genocide. Rachid Bledhan, Algeria's representative to the United Nations in Geneva, emphasized during a session of the Human Rights Council that the occupation authority has exacerbated the tragedy of the Palestinian people over the past 6 months. Despite calls for respect in international law in other conflict areas, the Palestinian plight remains neglected.
والكيل بمكيالين عندما يتعلق على مدى الأشهر الستة الماضية.
In the past 6 months, the occupying force has added another grim chapter to the enduring tragedy of the Palestinian people spanning 75 years. In light of this, we express our deep concern regarding the evident double standards in certain countries regarding the Palestinian matter and the international community's failure to safeguard a people facing genocide. Such discrepancies highlight the imperative of upholding international humanitarian and human rights laws, as well as respecting principles of international legality in all circumstances and conflict zones.
Bledhan stressed that the moral failure of some countries which defend the occupation and supported with weapons and ammunition used against children, women, and the elderly gives a guarantee for the occupier to continue its crime against the Palestinians.
The moral failure of some parties, which defends the occupation policies and its alleged rights to self-defense and supported with weapons and ammunition used against Palestinian children, women, and the elderly, as well as disabled people, gives a guarantee for the occupier to continue its war crimes and genocide against these vulnerable segments. It also encourages it to continue targeting healthcare facilities, UN organizations, and diplomatic missions, in addition to systematic targeting of humanitarian relief workers inside and outside Palestinian occupied territories, thus putting at stake the credibility and efficiency of our Council.
The war on the Gaza Strip is casting a shadow over the U.S. administration, which has renewed its call to the occupation Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and for the necessity of a ceasefire and allowing the entry of aid. While the occupation war machine continues its crimes and barbaric aggression against Gaza, the Democrats' fears increase that Biden electoral fate is at stake. Nabil Khazini has more details.
From a hug to a handshake to a slap on the wrist and now a warning, the relationship is clearly changing. US President Joe Biden, speaking on the phone with the occupation Prime Minister, made it crystal clear. US policy on the war in Gaza will be determined by whether the occupation takes a series of specific, concrete and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering and the safety of aid workers. The warning might have signaled that Biden is toughening his stance after an occupation strike that killed 7 people delivering food to displaced Palestinians in Gaza.
As pressure is mounting on Israel for its genocidal activities against the Palestinian population, especially after the bombing of the World Central Kitchen aid workers, 7 of whom were killed in 3 separate attacks by Israeli forces this last week, the pressure is also growing on Joe Biden. The President of the United States has continued to emphasize in his public statements that he wants Israel to be more humanitarian, but has refused to cut off aid, which is necessary for Israel to continue to carry out their assault.
The US Democratic Party fears that the genocidal war on the Gaza Strip will turn into a major political responsibility for a US president, which could topple him in the presidential elections scheduled for November. Analysis suggests that Biden is under increasing pressure from Democratic lawmakers over the worsening conditions in Gaza, growing fatalities, and the occupation's likely invasion of the southern city of Rafah. The political headache for Biden is worsened even more with the high number of Americans who are increasingly disapproving the occupation's actions.
Neither do the Democrats and the Republicans as a whole, as the American political elite establishment is committed to supporting Israel. Now, the American people are shifting on that. The atrocities that we see every single night on the news when it gets through, but especially on social media, which shows the horrific destruction of the Gaza Strip and the attack on the people of Gaza.
These pressures carry within them the features of an apparent crack between the two sides, and recent headlines are upping the stakes still more.
To different matters now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, arrived in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, in his capacity as personal representative of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, to participate in the 30th commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. The minister will have meetings with high authorities of the brotherly country, as well as with several representatives participating states and organizations in the commemorative activities of this important event for Rwanda, the African continent, and the international community. The Sahrawi Foreign Ministry confirmed that the statement issued after the meeting of the UN Secretary General Personal Envoy for Western Sahara, Staffan de Mistura, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Moroccan occupying state on Thursday is nothing but a reiteration of the same positions of intransigence and arrogance that prove once again that the occupying state does not have any political will to reach a just and lasting solution to decolonize Western Sahara. The Sahrawi Foreign Ministry affirmed in a statement the Polisario Front's strong condemnation of the statement content and its call for the UN Security Council to assume its responsibilities in confronting the policy of the aggression and escalation pursued by the Moroccan occupation since it violated the ceasefire agreement.
In this session, the Security Council will hear 2 briefings. The first, by the personal envoy of the Secretary General for Western Sahara, Mr. Staffan de Mistura, who will inform the Council of the result of his recent visit to some parties. Then the representative of the MINURSO mission, Mr. Alexander Ivanko, will give a briefing on the field developments in the mission's area of operation, especially with the Moroccan occupying state violation of the ceasefire agreement since the 13th of November 2020.
In the same line of thought, Sidi Ammar called on the Security Council to take concrete steps to enable the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara to complete the implementation of the mandate entrusted by the Security Council. Let's take a listen.
What we expect from this session and what we ask of the Security Council and what we have repeatedly asked for is to take concrete steps in order to enable the United Nations mission for referendum in the Western Sahara in order to complete the mandate entrusted to it by the Security Council since its establishment in April 1991.
Moving to economy updates, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that concerns are growing over the global economic fallout from China's excess manufacturing capacity as she began a 4-day visit to the country. Yellen remarked to around 40 representatives of the American Chamber of Commerce in Guangzhou that China, being too large, cannot achieve rapid growth solely through exports and would benefit from reducing its surplus industrial capacity, which is exerting pressure on other economies.
Overcapacity isn't a new problem, but it isn't. I believe addressing overcapacity and, more generally, considering market-based reforms is in China's interest. As I've said before, China is too large to export its way to rapid growth. And if policies are oriented only at generating supply and not also at generating demand, global spillovers will result.
The Kremlin has dismissed French President Emmanuel Macron's accusations that Russia intends to target the upcoming Olympic Games in Paris. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov refuted these claims, labeling them as entirely baseless. He criticized Western countries for making allegations against Russia without providing sufficient evidence. Macron's statement alleging malicious intentions by Moscow towards the Paris Olympics was strongly rebuked by the Russian presidency.
This is absolutely unfounded accusations in both the first and second case. They often sound but are never backed up by any adequate evidence or argumentation. We absolutely don't accept such accusations.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was it for tonight's edition. Thank you very much for following. Take care and bye-bye.